Hey, it's Ryan with S&B Filters. Today we're going to be installing our new particle separator 2 on the Honda Talon cars. This is going to fit the 2019 and up Honda Talons, and the part number is going to be 76-7019. I'm going to get this box opened up, show you what all is going to be included with your kit, and then we'll get started on the install. So once you get your box opened up, you're going to get your clamp kit, your 2 intake tubes depending on where you're going to mount your separator, and then a hardware pack with your harnesses and your couplers, and some assorted other items for your Talon as well. And then once we get in here, that's going to be the separator housing itself. Get that out of the bubble wrap. And on this vehicle, it's going to be a passenger side exit on the plenum for all the Talon kits. And then finally, your ducting will be in the bottom of the box here. Step 1, we're going to go ahead and get the vent cover removed. This is right behind the passenger seat. And we're going to use a flathead screwdriver to open up the 4 push rivets. There's 3 facing the outside of the car and then 1 behind the rear seat. And you just get a small enough screwdriver that you can get between the rivet head and the base of it there, and get these opened up. Once those are all opened up, remove that back rivet, pry forwards on the vent cover and upwards, and it should release once I get this one all the way out. There we go. And then there's going to be one more on this lower panel that we'll remove too. And with that one free, I dropped the rivet, but we will have this whole panel out. I'm going to go ahead and just place these rivets back in to keep track of them and get the one I dropped right behind the back seat. With the vent cover removed, we're now going to move to the snorkel cover. This is going to have 8 of the identical push pins that we just removed out of here. Underneath, there's going to be 7 and then 1 up here. So we'll start with the external one first. Again, same thing, just work them outwards a little bit, and then once they're there, they're free. And then I'm going to hop underneath right now and knock out the remaining 7 here. With all 8 push rivets removed, 3 down the side, 5 underneath, we can remove the snorkel cover from the vehicle. We're going to place that aside next to our vent cover and move on to the next step. With the snorkel cover removed, we now have easy access to the snorkel tube here. We need to remove this hose clamp going to the snorkel tube. And to do that, it's either a Phillips screwdriver or a 6mm socket. It's pretty hard to get a screwdriver back in here, so I prefer to just use the socket. And I will get this loosened up and the boot removed from the snorkel tube. We're going to move on and remove the 3 trim clips that hold the snorkel in next. So one is going to be right here, and then we'll pan over and show you right above the hose clamp you'll find number 2, and then right above that, tucked in on the other side, is going to be number 3. So I'm going to knock those 3 push rivets out, and we will be able to remove the whole snorkel tube assembly. We've got the 3 push rivets removed. One will be here, one's on this side. And the hose clamp loosened up, so I can just remove this entire snorkel tube assembly. There's actually going to be one more on top on the way out that just goes between the soft shroud. So I'll get that popped out next. There that goes. All right, so the snorkel tube is removed. We're going to move on and go ahead and remove the airbox cover, switching these 2 to the unlock side and then pulling backwards and upwards to expose the airbox. And if you had difficulty getting to the upper 2 clips on the snorkel tube, then you can also access them easily with this cover removed. I'm going to go ahead and remove the vent hole cover and the grommet included with the S&B separator, and get this grommet placed in so that we can get this installed into the car. So with that grommet there, we can come around to the vent hole here. And this will install just like the factory one did with the push clips and sit nicely into place. So I'll get those push rivets installed now. I'm going to re-secure our new cover using 4 push rivets. The old vent cover used 5. We're going to dispose of one of those push rivets. You can keep it as an extra if you lost one or broke one during the install. So there's going to be the one up here. We'll just go ahead and get these clicked in. I've already placed them into place. We'll get them engaged. We're going to go ahead and get the upper tube installed. I spoke about it a little bit earlier, but we offer 2 upper tubes, and this is going to depend on where you're going to be mounting your S&B particle separator. The one with the more sharp angle is for the lower bar, so this is going to point your ducting right into your separator housing itself, and then with the close to 45-degree angle, which is what we're going to be using today, this is going to position the ducting ready to run up and make the turn for your upper bar. So I'm going to only be using the upper bar tube today, and I'll go ahead and dispose of the lower bar tube. With the upper tube installed, I'm now going to go ahead and install the lower tube. This is going to be the long straight one and the coupler. And I will grab the hose clamps out of the hardware pack again. And this is just going to couple right here underneath. I'll show you in better detail once I get this out of the bag and we get it installed. I've prepared the lower tube with the coupler and 2 hose clamps already positioned in a way that I'll be able to access them once it's in the vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead underneath the vehicle now and connect the tube to the upper tube. And I'm going to kind of wiggle it on here. Okay, you can pause it. With the lower tube installed, I'm now going to re-secure the hose clamp on the airbox end as well as the upper tube end. Again, 6mm on the airbox end is probably the easiest way for you to get on this one. And then it's just going to be an 8mm or a 5/16 for the hose clamps that S&B provides. That will be on the other end here. So I will get this secured. Switch over to my 8mm and knock out the 2 hose clamps on the S&B tube. Next up, we're going to get the snorkel cover reinstalled. I've put all of my push rivets back together. The ones that had come apart, have all of them ready to go here. And we're going to kind of wiggle this thing back into place around the shock absorber and get all the push rivets reinstalled. We're ready to start getting the clamps installed on the roll cage. This is where there's going to be some differentiation whether you decided to install on the upper bar or the lower bar. The upper bar is going to use the 2-inch clamps that come in the box, and then the lower bar we include 2 35mm clamps here that are sized for the smaller bar. So we'll be using the 2-inch and going up top. The only difference is you just use a different size hoop. Everything else, the block and the pivot body that mounts to the separator and all the hardware will remain the same. It will all mount identically. So I'm going to get started on that right now. To protect the paint on the cage, I'm going to put a plastic bag over it before I go to install the clamp. And this is just going to help us with that clamp over. The bag can easily be removed and we're ready to start getting the separator mounted. We're going to go ahead and get our separator housing ready for mounting now that our clamps are installed in our cage. To do this, we're going to install 1 pivot body on each end where the brass colored inserts are. I've already got blue Loctite on my Allen head bolts here and my washers ready to go. And it's as easy as just getting these hand tight, and then we'll come back through with an Allen wrench. Using a 4mm Allen wrench, I'm gonna snug these up. Again, we're using Loctite here, so we don't need to get these super tight, but we don't need them loose either. So I don't use too long of an Allen wrench, and just when they get snug, I'm done. With the pivot bodies installed, we can now get the L brackets in place. This is gonna come down to how you wanna mount this on your vehicle. I'm gonna tuck it really tight to the upper roll bar, so I just want barely any clearance here, and I want it backwards a little bit so it doesn't hit my helmet. This really all depends on your specific application, what accessories you have in your bed. So once I get that in place the way I want it, again, more blue Loctite, the thick short Allen here, and then a washer. And we'll get this ran in and snugged up, and then make sure we do the exact same alignment on the opposite side so that the separator sits level. We're gonna go ahead and get the blocks installed now. We're gonna face the curved side towards the roll cage, and then the long bolt with a washer on each end, and then one of the nylon lock nuts, so you won't need to use any Loctite here. And one trick, if these aren't lining up, is make sure they're bent to shape before. It needs to be straight. So I did a little bend there, and then I'm all good to go. So now we put a washer and nylon lock nut on the other side. And to tighten these down, it's gonna be a 12mm on the nut side, and then a 5mm Allen on the Allen side. And we're not gonna tighten these all the way down yet until we get the separator up here. We're just gonna get them started enough where they can still slide back and forth. And we will do the exact same on the other side now. We've now got the clamps and blocks set up, still loose so that we can size them perfectly for the width of the separator itself. I'm gonna go ahead and Loctite the last two remaining bolts in the hardware pack. These are gonna actually bolt the separator itself via the L brackets to the blocks. These will, same thing, washer, Loctited bolt. And generally you're gonna wanna do this with two people. You will set your separator up here. I guessed the width, I was fairly close. And then we'll get these ran in hand tight and get everything positioned the way we want it before we start torquing it down. I'm in the car now and just put my helmet on and wanted to make sure I got plenty of clearance. I like mounting these separators as tight to the roof in the driver area as I can, just to give us the most bed space and kind of the sleekest look possible. We got the separator installed. I went ahead and centered it up, got my height where I wanted it to, and then I went ahead and torqued down all of our clamp bolts through the whole separator clamping system. So make sure you tighten all of these bolts down. Use Loctite on the ones that don't have the nylon lock nuts on the backs of them, and then get everything snugged up. Sit in the car, make sure your helmet doesn't hit it, or that it doesn't interfere with any accessories you have in the back of the vehicle as well. Got the rubber sleeve slid over our flex duct until the flex duct hits the cuff end. There's a little lip in here. Once you get that done, get one of the black hose clamps, just place it over the hose. And then we're gonna get this end secured so that we can figure out our cut length. So with that slid over there, I go ahead and get this hose clamp tightened down. With the hose clamp secured on the bottom side, we're now going to mark our cut length for our ducting. We typically want the ducting, cut, measure twice, cut once. We were going to cut a little long here and just make sure. The ducting's pretty flexible, so if we have a little extra, we can shove it back that way. So I'm probably going to cut right about right here on this rib, and we're just going to use a razor blade to do that. Okay. And then once we've gotten to the wire, I'm going to grab a pair of cutters and come in here and cut the wire itself. There we go. Use my utility knife on the rest of it. We're going to put the cuff over this end now and slide the whole assembly onto the separator. And I'm pretty happy with my cut length there. So I'll get a screwdriver and tighten down that hose clamp. We need to remove the cover over the shifter to start running our wiring harness now. Some of the older cars, you could just use a panel popper or a flathead screwdriver style push rivet. These are a little different. You got to use a pick and dig into the center head of the rivet. And then once you're in there, you kind of have to do it at the right angle. You can then pull the center head out like this one's already done. And then the whole rivet releases. So you can see the pockets in the rivet. You're trying to get underneath and in there to pull that head out and release the rivet. The rivet's alongside the back of the console. We will need to remove both seats. There's a little lever underneath and they come out real easily. So I'm just going to keep pulling the rivets out, going all the way back here so that we can remove this whole cover and run our wiring harness discreetly. All the rivets are removed, so we can just pull this up and out of the car now. With the center control stack out, we can now remove the rear cover as well. This is just going to pull forwards and then out. With the hood removed, we're now going to move on and remove this trim panel. To do so, we'll need 3 tools, a 5mm Allen to get all the Allen bolts out, a 10mm socket for the 4 10mm bolts, as well as a panel popper. There's 1 push rivet on each side. So I'm going to start working my way around this trim panel right now. We'll now remove the 3 more push rivets, or just the 2 more, sorry, that secure this rubber protector for the center console area to the trim panel. Get these out of here. And with those removed, we'll pull this tab over and this panel is free to come out of the vehicle. We're now going to be tapping into our 12-volt key on source here to turn the separator on when the vehicle's running. To do so, we're going to take this applied posi tap and remove the bottom from it. On this vehicle, it came with the winch preparation kit. So here's going to be your positive and negative for your winch. There's this connector right next to it. This white with the black striped wire is going to be our key on ignition accessory source. So to install the posi tap, we're just going to put the bottom half of it around the wire here. And we've already had we were doing some testing on this vehicle, so you might see that hole already in it. And then we're just going to thread this on from the top until it's bottomed out. Then this will be ready to run our accessory trigger wire back to our harness on our particle separator, and we'll get more into detail on that next. The next step in preparing to run our main harness is going to be removing the battery cover from the vehicle here. So it's 3 clips, and then this is going to come right off from the bottom. Next up, we're going to go ahead and remove our air intake cover, which is going to give us access to where we're going to put the main harness relay block. So we've already got a helmet separator installed in this vehicle, so you're going to see a little bit extra wiring over here, but you're going to take your main harness relay block that's included, and we like to zip tie that up out of the way right here on the left side. The block itself is actually screwed in to the back side of the battery cover right here. You can see it back there. So coming out of this harness, you're going to have a hot, a negative, the power source to your separator, as well as the accessory wire. The accessory wire is going to be the orange one that we have routed. It's in the sheath right here. So that's going to go up through the tunnel, and we'll show you that in a second, up to where we grabbed our accessory. And then the positive and the negative drop right back down to the other side, and we will get those installed on the battery terminals right here. So I've gone ahead and removed both battery cables, and this is all it's going to take to get our main harness power. So to further elaborate on that accessory wire, we ran it from right in that airbox cover, dropped it down through the hump here, and you can see it running up. I've just zip tied it to the main Talon harness here, and then punched it through right underneath the center console. And grabbed it out up front here. And so we'll cut and strip this end, and it's now ready to be installed in the posi tap, and I'll show you that here. So we're going to go ahead and remove the top portion of the posi tap, put this around the wire, install this back into there, mush it down a little bit, and then start threading this in to pull that accessory wire tight. All right, and with that tight, we'll just check, give it a little pull test, and we can continue zip tying our accessory wire out of the way. I've got both the negative for our engine particle separator and our helmet particle separator here, and we're going to go ahead and reinstall our terminal bolts on our battery. Here you're seeing the extra harness from the helmet separator as well, but this will be what your main harness looks like. So I've got our positive and negative both hooked up. I'm going to route these out of the battery box just like the factory wiring comes out. We're going to push our relay block for our helmet separator up in there as well, and then move the fuse for this, and use a couple zip ties to make sure everything's snug and in place, and then I'll go ahead and get the cover right back on. So we've gone ahead and ran our accessory up to our key-on power source. We've got the battery hooked up to the main harness with our positive and negative. We've got our main harness over here where it's going to live. So out coming from the harness now is going to be our main particle separator power. We're going to run that right across the top here, top of the airbox. I'm going to come up and out, but this is going to depend on where you're mounting it, if it's on the lower bar or the upper bar. So I'm going to go ahead and chase the roll cage all the way over and plug that into our main harness right here. This is what our power connection is going to look like. So it's going to be a little 2-pin Deutsch connector, and that's plugged into our main harness. Down below that, you'll see another wire running. That's going to be our ignition sensor. So we're going to run that down the cage, back through the same spot, make a turn heading this way, and we'll jump underneath the car, and I'll show you where our ignition sensor is going to hook up to the spark plug wire on this vehicle. We're going to go ahead and grab the spark signal off of the forwardmost cylinder here on this Honda Talon 1000. It's very important that the sensor points towards the coil pack. All you're going to do is use 2 zip ties, one around the front of the sensor and one around the back, to secure it to the spark plug wire. And you're good to go in the sheath part that has the protective covering over it, not the raw wire. And then make sure you just zip tie this up out of the way so it's not touching the valve cover or any exhaust components here. And we'll run that straight up to where you saw it coming through between the seats in the middle. With that ignition sensor run all the way out, we're going to go ahead and connect it to our main control board as well. We've got the main control board, if we look from the rear of the vehicle here, zip tied right up to the cage. With those 2 connections on one side of it, the outbound side of that is going to go straight to your engine particle separator. So you can go ahead and get all your wires tidied up now, and we'll move up to the front and start putting the hood of the vehicle on. But first we're going to go ahead and key on and make sure everything works right and our ignition sensor is being picked up. So the first test we're going to do is just go to key on, and we're going to make sure we hear the fan start blowing. And this should be at the lowest level, almost inaudible. So I've got air coming out here. So next we're going to go ahead and start the vehicle. And you should hear the fans pick up a little bit as it's now picked up that the engine's running and it sees the RPM signal. The final test is going to be to go ahead and rev the engine up and see if the fan speed increases with the revs. so we can see that the variable speed is functioning properly, and we can go ahead and start putting the car together now that we know everything works correctly. To reinstall this trim panel, just place it there. We're going to go ahead and pull our tabs up and over it, just like how we removed it. There's one more on this side. We can go ahead and install our 2 push rivets. As well as our additional 2 on the outward side. And then start running in our hex bolts. And I'll come around and torque these by hand afterwards. I'm going to slide the tongue underneath the groove on this one, roll it back, hit the right side, hit the left side, turn these 90, click them down. Hood's reinstalled, and we'll move it to the inside of the car next. We're now going to go ahead and reinstall the console here. To do so, I'm going to go over the shifter. Make sure we're on the outbound side of the bottom half of the console and just push downwards until that clips into place. Then we're going to go ahead and reinstall our 10 push rivets around the outside there. Moving to the back of the vehicle, we're going to click this underneath, slide it between the seats, and this is just going to be a snap fit in with a prong there. We ran all our wires. We've got everything zip tied out of the way up here above the airbox. So now we're good to go ahead and reinstall our airbox cover. Just 3 tabs go in, rolls up, and the 2 turn 90 degrees here. So with all that done, your install is now complete. If you have any questions, of course, give us a call at 909-947-0015. Thank you for your time.